everyone. Today is Friday, April 11th, 2025, and this is episode 149. I've got David Edmonson here to talk about ERP rescue projects and integration work. And David, you know what? I'll be a good host and let you at least say hi before I got my 2 minutes of admin stuff to talk about. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, happy to be here. I'm looking forward to it.
And thanks for being a guinea pig on doing the live format of this. So this is very much baby steps for me. I'm going to do a full episode to kind of explain more about what I'm doing, but I'm basically, the gist of it is, instead of recording audio and then also publishing it on YouTube with a little background, the episodes of Real Talk, I'm now going to start doing video and do it as a live broadcast, mainly because I'm lazy and I don't want to do any editing after the fact. And then there'll be some editing to turn the video into audio so it can still hit podcast platforms if you want to listen offline, or be able to listen with your phone locked and not have video going on. So basically just switching those two things, but there's a little more to it, and I'll do a separate episode to cover that. But that is why you'll see the title of this live broadcast is the format of the titles going forward. It starts with the episode number, which is 149 at this point, and then blah, blah, blah. Okay. Now back to what we're doing here today. David, thanks for coming on. We talked a while ago about this idea, so we're going to have to warm it back up a little bit. But maybe, how about before we get into ERP rescue projects and integration work, how about you just give us a little overview of yourself, who you are, and what you do?
Yeah. So I kind of ended up in this entire industry accidentally. Before I started Varix back in 2008, I was actually working in the real estate industry. 2008 was just a glorious year for that. Thankfully, I had worked myself out of a job just in time. I kind of automated my previous position as a property manager. And then I started doing websites for other property managers, and that's how I started Varix. I had 60 customers to start out. I thought I was going to run a hosting company and just build this big passive income business. Didn't know how to sell, didn't know how to market, didn't really know how to run a business. And so I started doing web development to just get customers to give me their hosting. And that eventually led to the e-commerce niche. And once I found the e-commerce niche, it made a lot more sense than building generic websites. I felt like I had a goal and a purpose, and I could see problems and I could see how to fix problems. So that's kind of how I got here.
I'm curious, when you started out, was it WordPress development or other platforms as well?
Ironically,
that's what I'm curious about.
No, ironically, no. My business partner at the time, who's still one of my best friends, he refused to use WordPress. He wanted to code his own stuff from scratch. That was part of why we never made any money. And he eventually had to go get a real job because he had a kid first. So he had a kid and I got the business, and here we are today. So it was all from scratch, and we did a little bit of Joomla and Drupal. I actually still have a Joomla site that I maintain for one of the counties up in Georgia.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm just curious because I run augforums.com on WordPress, and I don't really know what else is out there, so I was just curious. So it sounds like you landed in this e-commerce space, but you're here on not really a podcast anymore. I don't really have the name for it yet, but where I just talk about Acumatica. So yeah, tell me how then you went from e-commerce and getting into the Acumatica space.
Yeah, again, kind of by accident. Ironically, my first e-commerce client, I think I started working with them in 2010. But prior to that, when I was 14 years old, I had worked in their warehouse. And when I worked in their warehouse, I kind of got involved in their IT as well, just since I was always a computer nerd. And so then when I came back, it was ironic to start working on the e-commerce with the perspective of having worked out in the warehouse. And in fact, as soon as I got back working on e-commerce, I spent a lot of my time in the warehouse because order aggregation and fulfillment was a big deal. And at the time, they didn't want to do anything cloud-based. The particular client was cloud averse. And so we installed Shipworks. I don't know if you've ever heard of Shipworks. It's a Windows-based shipping aggregator. And the client was using Infor Fax. I'm sure people who listen to podcasts
Green
about
screen, I think, right? Green
yeah,
or black
exactly.
screen. Yeah.
Yeah, ERP people will know that. And it was actually the ProServe Solutions team who introduced the idea of Acumatica to us when we were working at that company. That client never went with Acumatica, but it got me interested in Acumatica. The open core concept or the open code concept, the no user licensing concept, both of those things were very attractive to me. And so it's actually 2017 when I first discovered Acumatica, and I really liked the idea, and I still mostly love the openness of Acumatica.
Yeah, I still love the openness of the product. The openness of the company has taken quite a big hit, in my opinion. You don't need to comment on that. But okay, what was I going to ask you? I'm sorry. Oh, yeah, you said the word accidental, right? Multiple times. I don't think I've met anyone yet who got into mid-market ERP on purpose. There's probably out there, but I think most of us got into it by accident. So that sounds like the usual path to me. But I like that you came into it from the front office in a sense, right? Because I think a lot of people get into it through the back office, either from the IT side, geeky IT person, or the accounting side. It sounds like you have the geeky IT side to you, but you got into it through the front end web side. And I like that because to me that gives you the perspective of, all right, what's the point of all this back office stuff, right? Do you feel like that's a benefit to you, or am I just making that sound more important than it really is?
Uh, I would say it's my superpower in the industry, as much of one as I can have, because I understand the web in a scenario. Understand the web to a depth that most IT people don't, and to a depth that most VARs don't. Although I'm sure there are VARs that are great at web facing technologies. But then I had a managed service provider division of my company in all of those intervening years between 2008 and now. And so I also have a pretty deep understanding of IT in general. And so combining that ability with my CFO's accounting expertise, the fact that I have developers, and generally people are happy. They are happy with my descriptions and my breakdowns of problems and my way to communicate things. And so, realistically, I would say that coming in from that end of the life cycle really is the superpower that Varix has right now.
And I hear there, tell me if you agree, but I hear a correlation between coming in through the front office and being able to give descriptions that people understand. You see a correlation to those?
I think anyone can do that. It's just hard
Okay.
work.
Okay.
Was it let's see, was it Mark Twain who said, if I need to give an hour-long speech, give me a day. If I need to give a 5-minute speech, give me 30 days?
I haven't heard that, but that makes total sense. That makes total sense. So you put in the work to be able to communicate concisely in a way that people can understand. Is that where you're going with that?
It's one of my favorite things when I can communicate effectively and concisely.
And what I hear you saying though is that doing that takes time to put that together.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I rewrite most emails 5 times before I hit send.
makes sense. So let's transition then to the ERP rescue project. So it sounds like this is you got into the e-commerce side from real estate. You then kind of get into the ERP side just because you're in the warehouse, another kind of accident. And then our ERP rescue projects something that was on your radar there, or did that kind of happen by accident? And if so, how?
I think rescue projects in general, and I'm sure other people have different words for this, and probably many other businesses are in the business of taking over problems. Most of the time, the reason that we have new clients is because of problems. All of the time, the reason we have new clients is because of problems. Many times that's because of really miscommunication in the previous relationship, I would say, is the primary reason. And so most of my web projects have always been rescue projects. And I just took that same mentality into ERP. And it was by accident, but it was also by design, because I was fixing so many Shopify and Magento sites that were supposed to be connected to an ERP system. But then the site was so broken that they couldn't tell whether or not the connection was broken, or the connection was so broken that they couldn't tell whether the website was broken. And so it was a natural progression to learn more about ERP so that I would know which of the things was actually broken. And then along the way, we built our own integration platform, and then we connected to 17 different ERP systems and learned Infor Sightline and Acumatica and Dynamics and F&O. Can't even list them all at this point.
So that kind of speaks more to the integration side of that. But before we go there, since you mentioned people have different words for ERP rescue projects, maybe why don't you give us a definition of what you consider an ERP rescue project? Does it mean it's someone who started implementing and isn't live yet? Is it someone who's live? Like, yeah, how do you define to you what it means to get involved with an ERP rescue project?
Primarily, it's a pre-live project, so it's an implementation that's stalled out. Prior to working on Acumatica, there's actually a project that I worked on. It was in the apparel industry and the reflective apparel industry, and this particular client was on Salesforce and QuickBooks and Fishbowl, and then some custom web system. And so they had made multiple attempts to try to refine that. They had spent multiple six figures on Salesforce trying to make that the ERP system. Then they made a six-figure attempt at moving to Dynamics with a particular apparel focused. I guess they call them ISVs in that channel as well. And yeah, after spending close to $500,000, they still ended up back in the exact same boat. And so in that case, it was basically starting from scratch. But in most cases, I try to take whatever is existing. So like in the case of taking over an Acumatica project that's gone awry, I try not to throw anything out because starting over is almost never the answer.
And is that because I've seen these stats, don't remember the exact numbers, but whenever I've seen these studies that try to study why ERP implementations fail, the number one thing that I typically see is it's not that it's lacking a particular feature. It's not that it was a particular bug. It's not a technical software thing, but it's the people side of things. And that's kind of what I'm hearing you say there, in the sense that you're going to work with the technology that you're given because your gut is that the reason why you've been failing over and over isn't because you haven't landed on the right software yet. It's because of other people reasons. Would you agree with that?
It's primarily a people and a communication and an expectation management problem. There's not a perfect system, and I think that's the primary expectation that's out of line at the start of most of these projects. I always say the people who sell ERP systems and the people who buy ERP systems are the two people in the relationship that will never use the ERP system.
I've never heard that. That's interesting. I mean, definitely on the selling side, but I never thought about it on the buying side.
Yeah, the person who signs the check usually isn't even going to log in, and so that's not always the case. But so then there's this huge gap in expectations because everyone is trying to make the person buying happy, which is the goal, right? That's why we sell. That's why we solve problems. We're trying to make someone happy, but making someone happy and doing the right thing are two distinctly different things. And so I really think that there is a obligation to do what the business needs done more than what I need done, and than what the owner or the ops manager or whoever wants done. It's the business first. And there are ways to implement the system and move it forward with that focus that will reduce distractions and reduce opportunities for pitfalls.
Love it. I also love the speed at which you communicate that. Um, uh, yeah, it's sort of to me a therapist tone, which is kind of the role, in my opinion, when you're walking into these environments. It's you're providing a therapist role, I think.
There
So,
is there's an element of that, of talking people off the ledge. Don't cancel all of the contracts and delete the ERP system. Let's talk about this.
and so when you go into one of these, do you go in with like I know how to turn this around, or do you go in more with hey, I'm just here to listen and gather information kind of a mindset? Those initial first few meetings, how do you, what's your mindset going into it?
I definitely want to listen and I want to find out. But I go in with the mindset of, I've never not been able to do this. And I don't see any reason that this is going to be the first time.
So optimistic, you go in optimistically, but
Mm-hmm.
other than that, you don't have like a checklist or anything per se. You're going to sort of read the room, read the environment, and start building what that plan's going to look like, or do you come in with sort of a pre-canned plan?
I have a good idea of what the plan's going to be. And I also don't mind sharing a few of the key elements of that, because I find
Ooh,
that
please do.
um, so this is true, and for the whole ecosystem that hears this, hopefully this makes us all better. I find that there are two core issues that really get projects hung up. It's product data and it's customer data. And those two things alone, if you really solve for those, there's obviously the whole accounting side of the house. I'm not the accounting guy on our team, so somebody else might say chart of accounts or something else related to that. But
Yeah,
customer
I'm gonna do
data,
something fancy here, and I'm gonna try scrolling this along the bottom. Let's see. This is me
okay.
experimenting with a video. Yeah, check it out. Check it out. I don't like the
Oh, there we
scroll.
go.
Let's see.
There we
Let's
go.
get
I
rid of the
feel like I'm
scroll.
on live news now.
Yeah. That was a little. There we go. There we go. I like that better. Let's go with that. All right. Yeah. Go ahead. Speak to
Yeah,
that.
it's product data and customer data. Products, especially if you go into any company and you go, show me where all of your product data exists, they will take you on a journey because it doesn't exist in one place. It exists in 15 places, and in all 15 it's wrong, and or
And
an
when you
element
when
of
you
it.
say that, I think what you're primarily talking about is the data that goes into the stock item screen in
Yeah,
Acumatica. Is that right? Okay.
yeah, exactly. And and so many issues are solved just by cleaning up the data, because when you clean up the data, you you understand the hierarchy of the data. You understand the actual physical elements of the data. You understand the relationship of kits and assemblies and non-stock items, and what, like, how did you record your sales tax in the past? Was it a non-stock item, or did you actually use the sales tax field? How are you trying to do it now? Who told you to do it that way? Is that a good idea or is that a bad idea? And so product leads to sales tax, leads to shipping, leads to customer pricing, customer class, customer catalog. And so working backwards from the product category or from the product catalog can have a huge implication on the overall success of the project.
I'm curious, you mentioned asking people who asked you to do this. Do you find that sometimes the answer to that is someone who's not even at the company anymore?
Yep.
But you asked the question. Yeah.
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 Yeah. Or either not at that company or not at the company who was selling something.
Oh, I love it. But you're digging. You're kind of digging. But is it? Would you say that digging is a good analogy? First off, because I'm going to
Yeah.
extend it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you're digging, and then does this feel like big construction equipment with the backhoe digging, or does it feel more like archaeological site dig where you kind of have the brush and you're being real gentle?
That's a
So
better
this does feel
analogy. Yeah.
is it
It's
more like
far
that,
more
yeah.
archaeological.
Because in a sense, you are kind of digging up history, right, to understand the present and understand where you want to go in the future. You need to understand the past. Is that a good way to say it?
Right. And you need to help the client figure out how to articulate it, because that goes back to that whole um, people problem. It's not always a people problem as much as it is a communication problem. And
Mm.
so it's like asking why enough times that you get to the real answer. David, why do you run Variax? Well, I didn't have anything else to do, so I just started my own company. Well, why'd you do that? Well, I liked computers. Well, why do you like computers? Well, because I get to solve problems. So you have to ask why enough times. Why do you use non-stock items for sales tax? Well, we didn't have a way to calculate sales tax. Well, why didn't you have a way to calculate sales tax? Well, we only have one location, and we're wholesale only, and then we added a brick and mortar and retail, and so we didn't really know what we were doing. Well, so now how many locations do you have? How many people do you have working for you? Do you drive trucks across state lines? Do you go to trade, all these things that relate to Nexus, um, and ultimately drives you to, well, you should just plug in Avalara, or you don't even need Avalara, because you shouldn't be doing sales tax at all, because you should have stayed a wholesale company. That retail business is not even worth all the effort. Let's not worry about that right now.
You just covered a lot of ground there, and I'm curious. When you go into one of these, you're probably, well. Correct me. Let me see if this assumption is correct. When you're brought into an ERP project that's stalled, do you think that typically your main objective is get us live, or is your main objective really dig in and figure out all the issues?
Both all at once.
And so, is part of your role helping to increase the appetite for these details rather than just say simplistically, I'm just going to get you live, because people are just like, get us live, get us live, get us live. And is part of your role increasing the appetite to really understand that getting live involves a lot of details? I don't know if I'm explaining that right.
I think it's less having to give them the appetite for it. That what I find is that people they want to understand the answers, and they want to be heard. And so in a lot of scenarios, if you only ask why once, or you ask why twice, you may not be close to the real answer yet. And so people throughout the company have great insight on the way that the company works. So you also have to get far enough into the ranks of the company. You have to build a rapport with all of those people so that you get real answers, instead of answers that exist somewhere in an SOP document but aren't even reality. And so I don't think it's about people having the appetite. I think it's more that people just haven't had the opportunity to be heard. And then if they were heard, maybe they were heard as complaining, or they were heard as maybe a roadblock previously. Like this person kept complaining about this process, they were a roadblock to change. Well, or not. Maybe they just had a really good perspective because of their actual experience in the business. And if you solved for that, you would you would actually make some progress instead of fighting about it or assuming that it didn't matter.
So I'm going to use your words from earlier. You talked about the buyer versus the business. Um, so I guess what I'm curious about is the buyer who brought you in oftentimes is super high level and all they care about is the budget. And they're going to say something like, look, we had $100,000 budget for this ERP project. We already burned through $50,000. You got 50,000 to work with. And that's where that like get us live pressure comes in, right? You're then talking about the business where you really need to dig, you need to spend time with people, you need to build trust. All that takes time, which eats away at the budget. And so, yeah, how do you help the buyer to understand that? And that's I think what I mean by increase the appetite for the details and that this is going to take time.
I think that's part of the natural progression of the archaeological dig, as you put it. You start to uncover things, and the people at the company know the backstory behind those things that you uncover. And so you really don't have to address it. So the way that you described the potential customer, that's not the way that I've interacted with my clients. So my clients come to me really frustrated. In the Gartner hype cycle, they're way down there in the bottom of that trough of despair. And they feel frequently like they just can't get answers, and they can't get anything to be actually produced. And so that's bringing them actual real answers. So in Acumatica, how does pricing work? Well, tell me how your pricing works. And they tell me, well, what about discount codes? And what about free shipping? And what about all of these things? What about customizations? Tell me how your pricing works. Tiered pricing? Do you have levels? And then they still say, well, how does Acumatica work? Well, what you just described. Like, we're going to make it work that way because that's the way that your business runs, and everything that you just described to me makes sense. There's nothing that you're talking about that's so wild and out of left field that we need to change the way that you do business. Acumatica either runs that way or with slight modifications can run that way. So let's make it work that way. And then you show them, you do a demo, you spend 6 hours of your life playing with their data, and you set up a demo and you show them. And now we're not talking about budget. We're talking about their baby, right? Because they came up with that pricing model. So I'm not going to tell them their baby's ugly. You got a dumb pricing model. You need to make it work the way that Acumatica works. And we just change the dialogue.
Wait, all right, I got to put that one on the screen. Talk about their baby, not their budget. I like that. That's good. So, and actually, before we go, well, no, let's linger on that. We got a comment actually. I scheduled this like 15 minutes before we went live, and someone actually, thank you, Stephanie. I'll put it on the screen in a second. But back on the baby, not their budget. You mentioned the word trust before earlier, and it sounds like that's kind of your first objective, establishing that trust, because someone's not going to share their baby with you unless they trust you, right? And so maybe you are brought in with the budget, because I think that happens a lot, but it sounds like you're shifting gears to build the trust, find the baby, and then shift the focus to be on the baby and not on the budget. Did I summarize that? Good.
Yeah.
Fix me where I went off.
Budget certainly matters, and it matters quite a bit. And I try to be respectful of that, and I try to be respectful of the fact that typically they feel like they've wasted their money. Right, that's part of being in that trough of despair. Of holy cow, I already dropped 100 grand on this problem. Or like that other client I was talking about, they got 500,000 under the bridge, just swept away in projects that they ultimately just gave up on, and they did hit the delete button and canceled the contract. Um, and so to be respectful of where they're at and the cost of getting there, that sunk cost, but it sunk. So part of building trust and building rapport is just being realistic. And I really do feel like that's the core component of my job. Like, let's just be realistic. You spent 200 grand and you got here, and you still got 200 grand to go. And I know your budget was 200 grand, but the reality is you're not there yet. You still have a long way to go. And the work that you've done is useful and it's productive and it's not wasted unless you hit delete. Don't hit delete. Let's take what you have and let's make it useful.
Love it. So how does this look? Is this a little bit better? Budget's important, but baby is more important than budget.
There you go. Throw some math in there.
Well, here, I'll hit Stephanie's comment. Sounds like Stephanie agrees with you. Business process first, then you back into the technology. It sounds like, to me, that sounds like you two are in agreement on that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that all of the VARs and all of the business consultants, I'm not sharing anything new. I'm the new kid on the block, so to speak, in this realm. And there are people who are really giants that I step on their shoulders, and I do. So that's another thing when we go into these projects. There is no assumption that anybody did anything wrong, or that anybody, like, it's not the VAR's fault, not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily. It's
Mm-hmm.
not. It's not the customer's fault, not necessarily. Um, you just have to figure that out, and you have to walk that line. And it's a bias towards getting things done instead of a bias towards you know uh, enacting my opinions or my preconceived ideas or my ideas for the business.
Explain that one more. You said it should be more focused on getting things done than on. Explain that again.
The important thing is, what do we need to do to make this project a success?
Mm,
So it's less about, well, so and so did this wrong. Well, this person used to work for us and they said to do it this way. They
right.
didn't even know what they were talking. None of that, like, it matters for the history of the project and for context, but it doesn't matter from the perspective of who's right and who's wrong.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
And I'm sure
Then,
you've been in this industry far longer than I have. You've probably seen this from the other side as well.
for sure. Yeah. And I think another word you used earlier, let's put it up on the screen. I'm having fun with this. Sorry. To me, a big part of it is not knowing it. It's this word that you used earlier. It's communicating it, right? And I think a lot of times, I don't know if it's a lot of times, but sometimes you wind up with situations where the consultant and the client, it's just not going to work, and it's not something wrong with the consultant. It's not something wrong with the client. It's just not a good match, right? And and it comes down to communication, styles of communication, and so it's not about knowing it. It's about being able to communicate it. Um, and I think you're good at that. I think you're good at slowing it down, finding where the real issues are, coming back to building that trust, right? And a lot of that comes down to communication, I think. But tell me what you think.
I would say that's probably the core skill for us to learn as humans: communication in all all segments of our life. That's a marriage. That's a parenting relationship. That's being friends. It's running a business, having employees, having clients. It's marketing. It's all communication.
Love it. I do want to hit the integration side of your work. And since I'm totally experimenting here, I'm going to experiment with something else. I'm working with Trail these days. We're in accounts payable automation, although really Trail was built for fraud protection. So I got a little 2-minute commercial I'm going to play. And then when we
Nice.
get back from that, we can shift gears to integration work. How's that sound?
Perfect.
All right, here we go.
What if 85% of the time spent navigating manual accounts payable work disappeared, effortlessly leaving you with a clear, secure path forward? Meet Trailed, the smarter way to streamline, automate, and protect your AP. Trailed's AI, like a seasoned navigator, expertly extracts invoice data from even the trickiest invoices, allocates coding, and matches line items to purchase orders and receipts. Unlike traditional OCR that keeps stumbling over the same mistakes, Trailed learns how you deal with your suppliers, adapting itself to the nuances of your AP landscape for unparalleled accuracy. And just like you expect a vigilant lookout on credit card payments, Trailed offers 24/7 monitoring of your invoices, scanning for anomalies and risks of potential fraud. With all your invoices clearly mapped and tracked in one place, you control the pace. Set up workflows in seconds to automatically approve and fast-track low-risk or PO-matched invoices, while directing higher-risk invoices through digital approval paths. Approvers can easily review and approve on the go. Approved invoices are seamlessly synced in real time with your accounting system for batching and processing. You'll gain a bird's eye view of your supplier payments and any associated risks, like changed bank details or improper approvals. Plus, suppliers are verified across the network in government databases, offering executives high-level oversight over potential pitfalls before releasing payment. Elevating your finance team with Trailed isn't a complex project to take on. As a seamless extension of your existing system, you'll be up and running in hours, not months. So, if you're ready to elevate your finance team, automating your AP while staying in control, it's time for Trailed.
That looked pretty official, huh? This is like a real show or something. I don't know. Thanks for the little
Look out, Joe
break.
Rogan. Tim's coming for you.
Oh, yeah, I don't know about that. I'm way too ad hoc duct tape for something of that level. So, integration work. Your company, Varix, did I pronounce it right?
That's correct.
Talk to us about that. What did you say? 17 ERP integrations or something? Talk about the product side first, then we can maybe back into the services side.
Yeah. So in 2014, when I was doing the e-commerce work for that pipe distributor, that's who I worked for first on my first e-commerce projects. They had 7 different websites. They had fax, Infor fax, which was a green screen. The only way I could get data in and out of that system was actually to print to a file that was fixed width delimited. And then I wrote some little, I think I used Python to write a little script that would scrape that and turn it into a CSV. And so one of the things that the client wanted on their website was a quick order pad where you could just go in and type SKUs and quantities, and you didn't have to shop the whole website. Because most people, when they're doing a construction project, they know what they want. They know they want a 1/2-inch PVC fitting and whatever.
Just a search feature, basically.
No, not even a search. Just literally like type the SKU and it auto-populates quantity. Do the next one, SKU, quantity. So order pad is another way. So I met the point there is that I met my lead developer, George Phan, out of Vietnam because he had built a Magento module that did that. And so I bought the module for $99 and he installed it for me. And while he was installing it, he discovered other issues in my Magento instance and he offered to fix them for me. Well, me and George have never stopped working together. And George built an integration platform based off of all of the work that I was doing. And so it's called Hexasync. So you can look up hexasync.com. It comes up under B Hexa as well, which is the name of
Spell
his
that for
company.
me.
Hexa, like a
HEXA.
hexagon, and then sync,
.com.
SYNC.
Oh, okay. I'll put that one up on the screen too. Give me a second.
So ultimately, we built our own middleware based off of all of the projects that we were working on. So we had the Infor Fax project, we had an Infor Inspire project, we had a Microsoft RMS point of sale project. So these were all client server applications. We originally built a Windows app that would do the synchronization. Then we ultimately moved it into the web and used the Cloudflare secure tunnel technology to tunnel into the Windows apps and build an API bridge.
Do you find that, so I'm going to shift then to the services side. Do you find that most people come to you really looking for integration product because there's a million of them out there, I feel like, or do they come to you looking for integration services and then you kind of bundle the product into it because it makes the services work take less time?
Most of my clients don't know what they want. They just want it to work.
Yeah, which to me is the latter then, right? Like they just want it to work and you're gonna put them on the product, and the reason is it's going to take less services, right? So less cost overall because you're not going to build it from scratch. But yeah, they just want it to work, right? So they're not really looking for an integration product that they themselves can use internally. They just come to you, make the thing work, right?
That's right.
Yeah. So
and so we've built, NetSuite, Acumatica, Dynamics, Business Central, Dynamics F&O, Shopify. I think we have a working BigCommerce. I don't do a whole lot of work with them. Magento, both the open source and the commercial product. I guess Adobe Commerce. We even have it's in the icebox right now because we're so focused on Acumatica, but I actually have a QuickBooks desktop connector, which when I get it to market will kind of be life-changing for a lot of companies who just don't want to leave QuickBooks Desktop, but you can't find any integration tools into QuickBooks Desktop. Nobody wants to build a Windows app to connect, but we did.
Interesting. And that's still a pretty decent market, even though they're probably trying to kill it. And maybe they already have officially, right? I don't know. Is it still supported? I feel like I've seen something about it not being supported anymore.
Keeping up with what the ivory tower is. I actually just found out about Authorize.net being deprecated last week in Acumatica.
So it sounds like you don't really care what the ivory tower is saying. You don't care until it hits the street, right? Once you see it on the street, you know it's real.
Yeah, exactly. So doing a little bit of shuffling from that, but there's always a way.
That's a great way to put it. I love it. So yeah, we don't know, but we know you're still seeing a lot of QuickBooks Desktop companies out there, and so
there are millions of people on QuickBooks Desktop, and they're not going to until that computer dies in the closet that runs QuickBooks.
Yeah,
and they can't find their CD or their install file. They're not moving.
So true. That's so true. I didn't know you worked with that many different platforms. I was trying to get like I was trying to get a screenshot of your integration site up on the screen. See if I can do this.
Yeah, we have a lot, and then they have more. They're out of Vietnam, and so they have quite a few other customers besides me at this point, me and my customers. But we've built a lot of stuff together, and so really we're in a phase right now. Yeah, there you go.
That's we did
you
haven't listed QuickBooks Desktop, but you got a bunch of stuff on here. It's cool.
Yeah, we did a SAP B1 to Shopify integration. We've done quite a few.
Cool. And when you talk about integration work, as I understand it, I haven't done a lot of these projects, but as I understand it, you're really talking about two things. When you're talking about a connector, like you know how to talk to a system, and there's all sorts of different things you might want to get out of that system. So you kind of build that connector up over time. But then you also talk about the integration itself, which is the true middleware, because it's never just taking two APIs and making them connect directly, right? There's always
Right.
something that company's going to want to. There's some custom stuff that happens in the middle as the data is moving back and forth. Is
Yeah.
that true in your experience?
100%. Maybe 200%. That's the thing, and that's where people, especially the non-technical people, and I relate to this not because I'm non-technical, but because I'm a CEO, and some like, why can't this just be easier? Why can't we just connect? In my world, I use Zoho Books for my accounting. Ironically, I haven't even moved to Acumatica, but I use Zoho Books, which has projects built in, which has timesheets built in, and I want to connect it over to my task management system so that I can just click a button and start a timer when I'm working on a support card. Why does that exist? Well, the reason it doesn't exist is because there might not be enough demand, and nobody built it, and then nobody documented both sides to explain how they work, and then nobody jumped in the middle to explain that how their business works over here and works over here is completely different than either one of them, and so you have to translate everything in the middle. um, and and so that's where, mad props to all the folks who have gone before me that have, Zapier and Celigo and Kenzium with their connector, what they do in Acumatica and directly to Magento or directly to Shopify. Mad props on what they've done. It is not easy. Building all of this and explaining to people that that's going to take 90 days to build that new connector. Well, why can't I just click a button and it works? It did that the other day when I connected my PayPal to my Shopify. It's just a button.
Yeah, there's a lot that happens in between, right?
Yeah,
I think there's two
absolutely.
pieces why it's not as simple as people think it is. Tell me what you think about this. I think one piece of it is every business is unique. Even though you're playing in a certain industry, the way you do things is unique when you really get into the details. That's what gives you a competitive advantage, right? That's one reason. And then the second reason, I think, is going back to that ivory tower. The marketing that the ivory towers spew out just sells these integrations as if they just magically work themselves out, right? But what are
Yeah.
your thoughts?
I mean, you nailed it. Absolutely. Yeah, I have a scenario right now where one of my Acumatica customers, they want to use product variants in Shopify, but they don't use matrix items in Acumatica. And so there's not really an out of the box solution to solve that problem. And so we had to build a solution. We added a meta field of a parent ID, which basically works the same way as a template ID, but it's not tied to an actual entity. And then you use that parent ID to marry the items together during the synchronization process. And so it's a simple solution at the end of the day, but taking the time to figure that out and then build that and then code that and then test that and then extend whatever fields on the Acumatica side are necessary. Uh, it takes a lot of work to make something elegant, and sometimes it takes 3 tries. Your first attempt seems like a great idea until you click the button and you try to explain it to a client and they glaze over. They're like, I don't understand a word you just said.
I've got the Richard Branson quote on my wall. Complexity is your enemy. Any fool can make something complicated. It is hard to keep things simple. It really is, right? I'm curious,
Absolutely.
that specific example, you must have gone through the analysis of adding that field or whatever you did, parent, I can't remember exactly what you said, versus moving over to the matrix something. that would then make the out of the box integration work, right? You assess both paths and decide to move forward with the one that made most sense.
Yeah, I present both options to the client. This is the work effort to move here. This is the work effort to move here, and or to keep it like this, and let them make the decision. Now, that's not always the right thing to do. Giving clients options and letting them make a choice is sometimes not the right thing to do. So that's where you just have to be careful. That goes back to an earlier part of our conversation. So it is it's incumbent upon us as advisors to do our very best to make the best decision for the company, and where possible, then to reduce that down to the simplest possible answer for the customer, which ties right into what you just read from Richard Branson there.
Yeah, and I've seen some VARs do that is you still present both options, but you make the price tag on one of the options really, really big. Oh, you want to import all data since the beginning of time? Sure, we could do that. It'll be $200,000. Yeah, just to help nudge towards the path.
Yeah, that's that psychological shortcut of pricing. You can help people make decisions that way as well.
But it sounds like in that example of the Shopify integration, we're really coming back to Stephanie's comment again, right? You're looking at the process first, and then you had multiple technology options there, but the important thing was understanding what they needed it to do, and you had a couple of different ways that you could achieve that, right? But understanding what it needed to do was the most important thing, and that comes first.
Yeah. And some of that comes from deep knowledge of this particular client's business, because I was with them when they moved from their first platform to Shopify, and then, or from the first platform to Magento, and then from Magento to Shopify, and from RMS into Acumatica. So I've been with them since, I think, 2017.
Well, cool. What do you think? Do we cover our bases here? ERP rescue projects, integration work. Any other thoughts you want to wrap up with?
I mean, I'm thankful to have the opportunity to be in this industry. Like, I used to think that it was a negative almost, that I've never worked for corporate. I've never worked for a firm. I'm not an accountant. I don't have a degree. I just started working, and I worked myself here, arguably to one of the hardest possible things I could have worked myself into. But it's recently become apparent that naive optimism and coming into the industry with a different perspective, I think that it's a benefit. And so that's my hope. I came in through the side door, and here I am. I'm going to do my best to help as many people with Acumatica projects that are sideways as possible and get them on the straight and narrow.
And I really do think that side door is really, really big, and the main way that people get into mid-market ERP. The front door, if there is one, is super tiny. I don't think many people come in that way. So I feel like you came into this industry the typical way or normal way. So best place for people to reach you. Maybe let's see. Let me put up your LinkedIn profile here.
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn.
Up on the screen here. Just keep it up.
Yeah, LinkedIn or david@variex.com is probably the best way.
Oh, you want me to just put your email up? Okay, I'll do that.
Yeah, that'd be fine.
You can even... Cool.
Spelled right the first time.
Yeah. Did I spell right?
Yeah, perfect.
Cool.
Well, thanks for taking the time to invite me on here.
Yeah, thanks for the conversation and for being a guinea pig on this video format. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, anytime.
And I guess that'll wrap it up for today. episode 149. Eventually there'll be an episode page, augforums.com/episode 149 with some, maybe I'll throw some related links on there. It's not there yet, but it will be there eventually. And yeah, David, maybe we'll have you back on in the future. We could show, I don't know, show some integration stuff. We can show screens with this video format now. So yeah, I'd love to have you back on and do something else cool. I enjoyed the chat.
Yeah, this was fun. Thanks so much.
Catch you later.